Good evening. Welcome. It is Tuesday, February 19th. It's just after 7 o'clock, and we're going to call this meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission to order. We will start with a roll call of all the members.
Gary Zico.
Here.
Brandon Bowersox.
Here.
Susan Jones. Nadine Schmitz. Here. Audrey Ishii. Here. Cynthia Hoyle. Here. Michelle Guerra. Brad Bennett. Here. And Morgan Johnston. Here. Okay, thanks.
Great. Hopefully Sue is on the way and maybe Michelle is as well, but we will just dive right in. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Okay. A motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Next up is minutes from the previous meeting. We had distributed minutes electronically. Hopefully people got a chance to glance through them. Are there any corrections or comments about the minutes? Does someone want to make a motion to approve? Okay. A motion by Brad. Is there a second? By Nadine? And any final comments before we vote? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? That carries. The minutes are approved. Now we have time for public input. Last month we had a few guests. This month we don't have any, so we'll just proceed right on to our business items tonight. And first, under new business, is a presentation that Gary has offered to give about bike lanes and sharrows. And I think, Gary, you've got it all queued up over there.
Yeah, I think so. There's a graphic that goes on with this. So you can take one of these, and at the top there is sorry, I should be on the mic. There's a URL that you can find the presentation as well. I want to start off by saying it's really amazing to see how Urbana is moving forward and making things better for cyclists and pedestrians. Over the last 5 years, it's just been amazing. I've been here 34 years, and it's great to see this. I really appreciate the work that everybody's done, and the engineers and the planners and the whole bit. Safe Routes to School has been a major plus, and Cynthia's worked really hard on that. Having said that, I'm kind of a critical guy. I like to look at things and see how they really turn out, not take things just on face value and dig a little bit deeper. So that's what I want to do here, is sort of look at a new way of looking at bike lanes and seeing in what situations sharrows might make more sense, or some other things actually, not just sharrows. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I know that when people put in these facilities, they go to certain references, and one of the references is the AASHTO. It's called the Bike Guide. That's not its real name, but that's what people call it, 2012. And they look at that, and that gives recommendations. It actually has a lot of shoulds, rather than the shalls. It doesn't have the force of the MUTCD, which says shall. So it says should, but people usually follow that, and it's sort of a national standard. Guidelines anyway. But there are some problems with that. And some of the other standards that we've looked at. Now, this isn't the AASHTO one. This comes from what used to be called the Chicago Bike Lane Guide. And this is the one that we started looking at when we were putting in the first bike lanes on Illinois. And this gives you a 44 wide street. Chicago has a lot of those, and shows how you can put bike lanes and parking and 2 travel lanes 44 feet wide side to side. The problem with this is how it looks in the guide. If you actually made a scale drawing, it looks like that. I'll go back to how it looks in the guide. What does it look like in real life? The cars are made about 80% too narrow in the guide. By intention, or I don't know why, but that's how it is. If you now open up the doors, you see this, which really doesn't look so good. So you can start with this and say, well, that's a lot of room there. That looks pretty fine. Then you put it out here. And then you put the bike lanes in, and it turns out like this, and it doesn't look so good. This is the AASHTO. The AASHTO also has non-scale drawings. This is the same. They're talking about a minimum. They give a minimum 7, 5, 10 bike lane. Looks like it has plenty of room, but it's non-scale. The parking lane could be 7 or 8 feet. The bike lane could be 5 to 7. They don't even specify the travel lanes. Those could be maybe 12 feet wide. Looks great. Oodles of room. But if you actually set up their minimum 7, 5, now why did it do that? I'm going to touch that again. 7, 5, 10, it doesn't look like that at all. This is another situation where they're looking at 5 foot on one side, no parking for on the other. Curious that the 4 feet on the right side look exactly the same as the 5 feet on the other side, which gives it a clue that this is not to scale. And the travel lanes look huge, probably 12 feet here. Looks like a lot of room. This is not a scale drawing. This is from NACTO. This is now the national organization. These are cities that have a lot of European influence designs. Many of these are hobby? Yeah, okay, but it's a city. It's put together by city, and they have a lot of things in there that actually are not approved by METCD. Not a lot, but they have a number of stuff like bike boxes and cycle tracks and stuff. This is one of their drawings. Again, they have the same minimum 7, 5, 10, and they give you this drawing, but they don't tell you how wide anything is. And if you will go ahead and put in 7, 5, 10, you may be surprised to see that the door actually covers most of the bike lane. So it's really interesting to see that these guides are not to scale. They don't give a good representation of what it looks like on the ground. What does a scale drawing look like? Well, this is sort of some basic stuff that you need to know to design this stuff. How wide are the lanes? How do they compare to different types of motor vehicles? A mini, SUV, a truck or a bus? How wide is a bicyclist? AASHTO says that a bicyclist should be 4 feet wide operating room minimum, 5 feet recommended. And if you think about a bicycle being 30 inches wide physically, 4 feet gives you 9-inch wiggle room on each side, which is a whole not a lot of room, even 4 feet minimum. And they're saying 5. So this gives you some idea of what it looks like when you actually have things to scale. So what does this mean now? Take a scale drawing of Illinois Street. This is Illinois Street. 7-foot parking, 5-foot bike lane, 10-foot travel lane. We're going to call the door zone both the strike zone where the door opens, and we'll call the startle zone another 1.5 feet, 2 feet or so, where even if the door doesn't hit you, you're going to swerve out of the way. A cyclist was killed this summer in Chicago. Door never touched him. He swerved out, got under a truck, was killed. So the whole door zone can be pretty wide. It's about 11 feet will get you out of the door zone. If you look at the general use travel lane, and if you wanted to be 3 feet away from the largest vehicles, you can see that that 3 feet is putting you, there's no room between the two. I mean, there is no room between these two 3 feet close passing zone and the door zone. So if we had looked at something like this, we may not have been so surprised at Illinois and having to ride right on this line to get out of the door zone, and then you don't have any room for close passing. You don't get the 3 feet. So here's the parable. Moses is a graduate student doing civil engineering at University of Illinois, and he comes down and he says he's heard that it's a good place to ride a bicycle, right? So what Moses does is riding to campus on Illinois Street, east of Lincoln, and he gets to Lincoln, crosses Lincoln, and what does he see? He sees the bike lane, right? He goes, wow, this is cool, I got a bike lane. This is my own special spot. He's going along, and he's figuring that this is going to be cool. Further down the bike lane, he sees somebody come out of the car, and that door covers almost completely the whole bike lane. Closes it, and he goes, whoa, I guess I need to be worried about doors opening. So Moses says, okay, I'll move over to the left side, stay out of that. Bus comes by him within 1.5 feet, okay? Not fast, but he comes by. Whoa, I see there's things on that side. So this guy is an engineer, or going to be an engineer, and he says, I want to figure out what's going on here. My expectation is that if I'm in the center of the lane, I should be relatively free of these types of hazards. So let me figure out how much these hazards come in on me. So he looks at this. Moses discovers that the door zone hazard extends 11 feet from the curb. He looks up the width of cars and vehicles, and he does all this stuff. He's a smart guy. He knows how to add and subtract. Not too hard. 7 feet. He looks at the close passing zone. He finds some scale drawings or does measurements and says, wow, so you actually have that 3-foot distance, right? This close passing zone extends 11 to 13 feet from the travel lane left stripe. So that is motorists need their own space of at least 11 feet, cars, SUVs, to 13 feet, larger vehicles, to pass cyclists within a margin of 3 feet. They're going to need that much room. So that's what we're showing here. You have to be actually outside of 13 feet if you want to be outside the close passing or 3-foot passing for a large vehicle who is right up against the left side of the lane. Okay? So Moses figures this out. Then he looks at, and this is to show you that it is really tight there, right? So here's a bus in the center of the travel lane, and the only room next to him is that 5-foot bike lane, right? So if you're in the middle of the bike lane, you don't have 3 feet. Now, do you really need 3 feet all the time? If it's really slow, maybe not. But that's the Illinois minimum safe passing distance, minimum 3 feet. So he figures this out, and he says, okay, I'm going down. On my right, I have the door, right? Where does that come out? Okay, that comes out 11 feet. On my left, there are buses. Where does that come from the left? 13 feet. There you are, right? Why do we call him Moses? He doesn't approve. He wants to part the Red Sea, right? He doesn't like this. He wants some clear space between the two. So that's what Moses likes. So he then comes up, well, I'm Moses now. He comes up with a spreadsheet to see how this actually works out. I think this works by hovering like that and going like that. So what you can actually do, and it's a little bit too big. We're not getting the whole thing here. So what can I do for that? Idea, somebody? F11? F11 is going to... Again? So how do I just make it smaller, smaller, smaller? Control, well, you mean F9 or Control 9? Control minus. Oh, Control minus, sorry. Okay, that's kind of small. Can you still see that? Yeah. Okay, so if you actually put this spreadsheet together, we have the bike lane width we enter right here, right? We put the adjacent travel lane width next to it. We put any parking lane buffer. We put the parking lane width on the right side, okay? So what is this left hazard? The left hazard is we need this 11 feet, all right? So, sorry, that's the left hazard. Do I got this right? Sorry, that's the 13 feet, right? We need 13 feet from passing traffic. How much do we have in the travel lane? 10. We need 3 more, right? So this 3 is going to intrude on the left side of the bike lane. If we look at the other side, we need 11 feet from the curb. What does the parking lane give us? 7. We need 4 more. Comes at 3 feet on the left side from close passing traffic. We need, from the other side, we're losing 4 feet. The bike lane is how wide? 5. If we subtract 7 from 5, we get -2. That's the overlap in those 2 zones. So you can put these numbers in, look at it. If we look at Goodwin, has -1. It's a little bit better. Why? Because the bike lane is a foot wider. If we look at Broadway, this is being planned now with a 10.5-foot travel lane, 6-foot bike lane, 8-foot parking lane. That will give us a 0.5. It gives us a half a foot of path that is clear of both the door zone and the close passing zone. If you look at John in Champaign now, Mattis to Russell, which is being planned, they're going to have a 2.5. Now, that's nice. Is it 4? No. AASHTO says you should have 4 feet, 2.5. If we look at Main Street downtown, now they have a situation, it would be possible in Main Street downtown to put in a 3.5-foot buffer, which would be nice, if you narrow the center turn lane to 10 and not have it 11. That will give us 2 feet clearance. If we keep that center turn lane at 10, travel lanes at 11, and that will fit in there. Redondo Beach, California has one with 3, and we'll look at that and see what that's like. According to what we're looking at, the plans for Florida, now I have a question mark there. I think that is right. But there's a number of sections we're looking at Florida and Kinch. This is with parking. And if you plug in those values, Florida, one section will give us 1 foot. The other section will give us -1. And the final section, this section on Kinch, will give us 0. So those are the ones with parking. We can also look at, if there's no parking, you don't have a door zone, right? There's nobody parked there. But you still have a curb edge hazard zone. You still have lots of junk going on there. You can have broken glass. So we're taking 2 feet away from the right edge of the bike lane. Say that's not the best place to be. So we're moving that At least we're taking 2 feet from the right edge of the gutter pan, actually. So if you do this, and if you look at Race, Florida and Mumford, now there's a 12-foot travel lane. The bike lane is 3.8, measured from the gutter seam. 3.8. The curb ed hazard zone, I'm saying, is 2. That gives us, we lose 1 foot on the left side to give us our 13. We lose 2 on the right. We get a positive 0.8. But you know when you go south of Mumford, I got that wrong. Florida, Mumford, I should have changed the second one. I think it's Mumford to Windsor, right? We lose 2 feet on the travel lane. We're down to negative 1.2. It's pretty tight down there if a bus comes by. You know, typically they'll give you some more room. But it's in the negative. The C's are not parted. Washington, Vine, and Philo give us a half. San Pedro, California, we'll see later. These are the sections that I've been looking at, information that Brad has shared. These are the ones without parking, 2, 3, 1. I'm not sure of these because I don't know where the gutter seam is. Brad said he'd let me know about that.
There is no gutter seam for those streets.
Okay.
Monolithic design. I mean, the gutter pans, if it wasn't monolithic before, the gutter probably be about 18 inches wide.
Uh-huh.
So you'd have about 12 inches of pan. But when you physically go out there, the street curb report is 1/4.
Okay.
So there is no joint.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, the bike lane would then be 5 feet wide. Well, we can figure that out and see with how.
That's to the flow line of.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so anyway, you can go there and you can feel that. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, but I want to make sure that people understand basically what we're doing, right? We're looking at the painted lines. We're seeing from the right with this cars, we need to come out 11 feet. From the left lane line, we need to come in 13 for large vehicles, 11 if there's only going to be cars and SUVs. We can just be 11. And hopefully, there's going to be a parting of the Red Sea there, right? There's going to be some space, ideally 4 feet, even 5. Not 0, not -1, not -2. Okay, so that's what the spreadsheet is about, and you can go and fiddle around with this. That's kind of fun. So what does this mean now? If I can get this, where is the other window now? Somebody? I won't do this again. I'll stick with my Mac. Okay, I can just get rid of this one, and it should show up. Okay, so we have that. Thank you very much. So what does this mean? So what are we going to do with this more scaled, detailed view of bike lanes to see how they actually relate to reality? Are we going to continue to install these double hazard lanes with 0 or minimal effective width? Or are we going to look at some other types of infrastructure that creates more pleasant, less intimidating environment without marginalizing cyclists or directing them to ride in these hazard zones? So what are we talking about? This was the Redondo Beach one, which I think had 3, which is pretty good. So this is our right buffered bike lane with parking. This is the type of thing that I think we could do downtown Urbana. Maybe not as much room as this, but close to this, getting people out of the door zone and giving them a couple of feet in the Red Sea there that they can come through. This is when you don't have parking. This is a 4-foot buffer with a 6-foot bike lane. This is something that I hope we'll do on East Washington, where we're taking over a whole travel lane and turning it for bikes. If we buffer it along the right, we get rid of the right edge hazard zone. We have a 6-foot bike lane. And what's really nice about that design is that you can pull that buffer away before intersections. Motorists will then be encouraged to go into that lane and to merge in and to make that right turn. The reason that motorists don't go into bike lanes as they're supposed to make a right turn is it looks like a shoulder. I mean, it's only 3 or 4 feet, right? It doesn't look like very inviting. But if you make that wide, that's one of the advantages. So this is something that we could be done here. This is John Street, Champaign. Of course, you've seen the Sharrows. They're going to be putting more Sharrows there. I wonder why not Sharrows in downtown Urbana? We have all these 3- and 4-lane streets coming right downtown. Things like Illinois, is it, or Elm, where there are 2 lanes and they widen to 4 and they go back to 2. Even Main Street and Race. Why not put Sharrows on those right lanes? This is right downtown. It would be great for cyclists and make a statement. This is another thing that we could be doing. No door zone hazard with back-end angle parking. Now, there's no door zone hazard either with front end like we have on 6th Street on campus, but people can't see where they're backing out. Now, at least you see the right lights go on. You know they're backing out. That gives you time to react. better than the door. But here you have a great view. Cyclists, motorists can see each other. No door zone. You can remove parking from one side and see if you can actually. I actually consider door zone more of a problem than the close passing zone, because close passing zone, the motorists are seeing you. They may try to squeeze by, could be dangerous, but they see you. People opening the doors don't see you. Contraflow bike lane. Take a two-way street, make it one way. Now, campus is going to be doing this on a number of streets. I think Daniel will have a contraflow bike lane. We should have them on all of them. You put in a one-way street, I will guarantee cyclists will go the wrong way. You do not go out of their way one block to avoid that street. They will go. Motorists do not go the wrong way on one-way streets because they know they can smack, bicyclists. So think about making streets one way with a counterflow bike lane, and we get more room that way. Only bus bike lane, okay? Again, you're avoiding it. Lots of room for bicyclists, another design. We were talking about this on Green Street between Wright and Lincoln. I don't even know what's happened to that now. Is they're still thinking of that, or I'm not going to do it. But whether or not, we can come back to that. Let's make some connections. There are a few places where connections can make a big difference. Now, this is Cynthia's probably least favorite place, University Avenue. This is my second least favorite place to ride a bicycle. Go to the MTD offices on University. 40 miles an hour, it's, I can do it, but this is the only thing I like less than this is Springfield, West Springfield, with 2 lanes and gravel shoulders and trucks coming through. Now, if you go on North Popular, you can make a little connection across there. Now, all these employees can get to MTD without having to go on University. It's already done at Carl. They have a crossing on Carl on exactly the same rail line. Well, whatever. This may not be the ideal one, but there may be ways to provide access like this. Connections are important. And connections between 2 streets that may have a cul-de-sac, and they can make them come through, things that we can look at. This is really my favorite. This is a bicycle boulevard in Berkeley, California. This is really clever. They have this obstruction here, and that prevents cars from coming through, but emergency vehicles have enough clearance to go right through that. So these are streets that you cannot go through, low speed, very low volume, and people just use this. You see kids, you see everybody just taking over these streets. It's sort of like a cyclovia all the time on these particular streets. People have local access, and the people living there love them. We need some bicycle boulevards.
Do they have any issues with people hitting that little curb in the middle?
Well, if you see a do not enter with a $75 fine, it should say $75 fine plus repairs.
You mean a cyclist,
With a bike.
Fred?
We've actually had complaints from people that were biking with accessing our sidewalk ramps where, they hit, on the ADA accessible ramps, they've got the curbing in it. We've actually had people complain about where they didn't feel that the curbing was visible enough when they came up with.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, and there's somebody who hit the button from their banner, but,
Yeah.
and there's a couple of bad places where it's not visible enough.
Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily need to have the obstruction. I mean, and I don't know if Portland uses them, but anyway, they're told the cars are not allowed to go through. You could make it just sort of narrower if you don't want emergency vehicle access as well. But this is something that we could be looking at as well. So what's the bottom line? Really, I think that when we're considering bike lanes, that I'd like to look at this effective width for all of the ones that we look at and see if we can do something to, have Moses approve, right? That means to part the two hazard zones here, okay? And you can use the spreadsheet to put the numbers in. You can widen the bike lane, but without narrowing the travel lane, because if you narrow travel lane, you haven't done anything to get away from the close passing. You can widen the travel lane from 10 to 11 or 12 feet without narrowing the bike lane. That will give you some more. You could provide a right side buffer against parking or a curb edge without narrowing the parking lane. You could remove parallel parking, replace it with bag and diagonal, take it off one side. I talked about contraflow as a possibility. If you can't do any of those things, then I think it makes sense to provide sharrows on that particular street or look at some of the other alternatives that we've been looking at. So basically, this is a summary of the idea. The effective width should be considered. When we're looking at bike lanes, you subtract from the painted lane width The left hazard is the close passing zone. You look at how wide is the travel lane. You subtract that from 13. That tells you how much you're coming in from the left. The right hazard is the door zone. How wide is the parking? You subtract your parking from 11. That's how far it's coming in from the right. If there's no parking, you use the edge hazard zone instead, 2. And that's how you get Illinois 5 minus 3 plus 4 minus 2, Ray Street 0.8 and minus 1.2. So I think this sort of provides a bit of a truth in advertising for bike lanes, and there's no surprising. So I'm offering you this metric, and I'd like to see us use this to give us a more reality-based view of what we're doing.
Any questions? Any questions for Gary?
Sorry?
The edge hazard zone.
Yes?
2 foot. Is that everywhere? It's
Well, I'm putting it in here because there's a lot of stuff that happens at the edge. I mean, that's where you get glass and you get debris. That's where you get ice. That's where you get snow. And, I mean, if you had a street, and there may be some, where the gutter seam comes out, and from that point, the pavement is in great condition, right? And the city's going to maintain it and sweep it and make sure there's no ice or snow there, you might say we don't need that 2 feet on the right. Now, so, I mean, it sort of depends. But that's typically not the case. And one of the things with bike lanes is that because there's no motor traffic there, everything tends to get swept into the bike lanes. I mean, that's where you get your flats and all these other things. But if that's not the case for some reason, you know, you can take away that edge hazard zone if you want. But my basic calculation, I would say if you're going to do that, then call it an adjusted effective width. And then I'll say, well, what's adjusted for? We have a fantastic edge there. We don't need to take off the 2 feet. You could adjust the travel side too, right? You can do this side, the 13 minus 10. It could be 11 minus 10 if there's no trucks and there's no buses, right? You could get rid of that too. If you have a parking lane and there's virtually nobody ever there, there's no door zone, right? Get rid of the door zone. You don't have to worry about it. Now, you know, there may be some cars at one point, but if you really think it's better to characterize a street that has a parking lane, now we're thinking of some combined parking bike lane in places where there's virtually no parking, then say this is the adjusted effective width. And y'all want to say, well, what are you adjusting for? Nobody ever parks there, so we don't need it. So great, you got this big buffer. You can sort of put a bike lane next to that. You don't have to worry about it. But I like starting with sort of a general, you know, basic one based on the measurements with the 2 foot adjusted edge sign. Also measuring from the gutter pan, as Ashto says, if there is a gutter pan, because most cyclists are not riding to the right and probably shouldn't be. So you can adjust it if you want, but I'd like to have the basic one, and then you can adjust it. Yeah.
How many people have been working the Champagne for
I don't know. At least one. Yeah, at least one.
How about nationally? Does anyone have any data on what statistics are for bike-related crashes?
Well, there is currently a study underway through the League of American Bicyclists. They were given a $10,000 contribution. They are trying to collect extra data on all of the fatal crashes in the country. They released some preliminary data in March of 2012, and I would think any time now we should be getting a follow-up on that, because the way the data is collected nationally, we don't get much information about, you know, where the bicyclist was, what kind of infrastructure there was, what kind of crash actually occurred. And so there's hope that we can get a better idea so we can start looking at that. And so dooring would be one of the things that they would include in that database. So those are pieces of information that we need right now. We don't have all the data that we would like. We know that depending on where you are, the data we've got so far shows a fairly low rate of crashes with dooring, and some of the research has shown that when you have bike lanes and you indicate how far the doors swing out with tick marks, that bicyclists tend to ride farther outside of the door zone than they do when there's no bike lane there, because it gives them a metric for measuring how far they are from the car and the door zone.
Two responses to that. This is Chicago for about a year and a half. Now, I don't know whether there were bike lanes or not bike lanes on this. And
Well, most of them are not.
another thing is I know that someone was doored on Pennsylvania and had a pretty nasty fall. I've tried to find out if that was reported to the UI police, and I have not gotten anything back yet. I filed freedom of information, and nobody, you can't even call them and find out if they're working on your request. And I spent some time, I don't know if they're being reported or not. A third thing, Cynthia talks about moving a little bit further away. Door zones are interesting. If somebody's going to open the door in front of me, and I'm going to hit the door, where do I want to hit it? Smack straight on. There's a spring. It's going to hurt, right? What's the alternative? My right handlebar, 1 inch. What happens when I hit that door? Here, I'm thrown into the travel lane. That's how people get killed. So just being a little further from the door zone doesn't hack it. You got to be out of it. And even if you're a foot away, up in Chicago this summer, door opens, you swerve, you can die. So it's just not being a little bit away. That's the hazard that I really don't like. And it is a problem. I mean, they're collecting the data in Chicago, and I don't know what's going on here. So
here's a question for you. I mean, I think this effective width is one interesting measurement to look at in us sort of comparing what streets are bike lanes spacious enough to be safe versus too cramped to be safe. But I guess I wonder, do you have, what's your opinion on how we weigh these different factors? So on the one hand, the factor of the risk of the door zone is one that you've talked a lot about. But on the other hand, if you move to a Sharrow instead in order to eliminate the risk of the door zone, it seems to me Sharrows have all kinds of downsides as well, including the whole concept of cyclists reporting, on surveys that they feel safe in bike lanes, that they have some perception of safety, and that then more of them cycle, and then there's some critical mass of more cyclists out there cycling, which has a positive effect on making the road
in the door zone,
safer.
Which makes them all safer. Okay, explain that to me.
Well, one of the concerns that I have about what is recommended sometimes is that we know from a lot of data that narrower travel lanes slow vehicles. That was part of what was done on Illinois. It was a road diet. And so the slowing of vehicle speeds results in higher safety and fewer crashes for all roadway users. So the original design that Gary showed of what they did in Chicago, they had to collect data on it because IDOT did not want bike lanes in Chicago. So they collected data on those streets, and what they found was not only were there fewer bicycle crashes, there were fewer crashes of all kinds, vehicle on vehicle, vehicle and pedestrian, because when you slow the vehicles, you reduce the crash rate and you reduce the crash severity. So you've got to balance the reduction of speed in vehicles with the risk of dooring, which we don't have any data on to work with right now in terms of what width you need and whether or not it increases doorings to have them, et cetera. And we do need that data. And if the data comes in and shows that it is substantially increasing crashes and the severity of crashes because of dooring, then that will be something we have to do in terms of design.
Morgan?
I mean, I'd like to see, I guess it's my dream would be that we get more and more people cycling, and therefore we are able to go back and remove those parking lanes. And that's especially on the campus. I am speaking from the campus perspective of we want fewer and fewer vehicles, and so that's right. That's just my thought about it is we wouldn't have dooring if we didn't have those parking lanes.
But we don't have Sharrows anywhere on campus or anywhere planned, do we?
We do have bike routes planned that could end up having Sharrows. The decision about whether they'll have Sharrows or not will be during the engineering phase.
The thing that's nice about the Sharrows is that it's instructing, it says bikes may use full lane, bicyclists, and it's instructing motorists, it's instructing bicyclists on how to safely interact in these narrower lanes, particularly on parking. The bike lane, remember Moses, he says, what's this? I expect we design any kind of travel lane for any traffic. Your expectation is that if you're in the center of the lane, you're going to be free from the other vehicles coming on each side, or from things routinely happening, like doors. Motorists don't drive in the door zone. So when Moses finds out that it's like this, it's a shocker. Cyclists are getting really...
I don't know if that's true. Motorists do drive in door zones.
Very seldom. Well, look. It's easy to know because you can tell where the tire tracks are on all the streets. And what happens if a motorist does get doored? Who pays for it? Who gets hurt? The guy coming out. For bicyclists, it's the other way around. It's the cyclist that can get killed, and he might get his car scratched, right? So it's a sort of a different thing. But I mean, that's why I think the Sharrows, with education, are better in these situations where there really is, and I think it's much better than this when you're actually putting in the double doors. You're going down between two lanes, and that's really not the place to be. And now I'm sophisticated. What do I do on Illinois Street? If there's nobody parked, I'm over toward the right. If there's somebody parked, I'm either right on the line or I'm taking the lane, you know? If I see a bus coming, I'll probably take the lane because I don't want them coming by me. But I know this. But I have my video. If people, there's a link here of Illinois. Everybody right up in the door zone. Everybody on the right, and everybody made the left turn on Goodwin from the right side of the street, from the bike lane. It's not teaching them how to actually make a left turn from the center. So you have infrastructure that is giving them a hazard, not teaching them what they should really do, and encouraging to do wrong stuff. Will Sharrows make everybody wonderful? And
That's my
no.
question.
No.
You know, how do you have any
But the
data that says
infrastructure
that they're
is
instructive?
leading people to expect them to do something right. You can have education on top of that. And I mean, that's
And you can
my-
have education on top of the bike lanes too. That's, I would wonder, you know, it seems like there's
What
a
would the education
selective,
be for Illinois Street?
as you said, I mean, one of the thing I was going to say was that, you know, you talk about this thing, well, if I'm riding down the road, I'm just wondering how often I have a bus going by me while somebody's dooring me anywhere in Champaign-Urbana. You know, our bus drivers they tend to hang behind if
Okay.
there's anything close.
Well, all I'm saying is, this is really what I want to propose, that we at least look at this. We have a metric that we can look at. If you want to adjust it for a certain street, that's fine. We haven't even started discussing how much space do we need to get through the Red Sea.
Right.
AASHTO says 4. You know, the best we're seeing here is we can get 2 on Main Street, you know. That's better than 0. It's better. I don't think we're going to disagree that 3 is better than 2 is better than 1 is better than 0 is better, right? I mean, I think that sort of makes sense. Where we're going to put that,
Yeah.
I don't know. And at a slower speed differentials, you may say, I don't want to change the metric. You might say, well, maybe 1 is okay there, but if it's faster, it should be at least 3. But I don't want to go there tonight. I'm just trying to give us a way of understanding physically what's happening on the ground with the bike lanes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, and we'll probably wrap up here in a minute and move on to our next business topic, but I'd say this effective width is one helpful thing in looking at space for a bike lane, and that we probably have our work cut out for us because I think this trade-off of when bike lanes are the right treatment versus when Sharrows are the right treatment is one of the key questions for us all to help give guidance on during the Bike Master Plan update, so that that document can do a good job of saying what are our criteria, what are we going to consider, and for future roadway designations, how do we balance this? Because it's very tricky. There's a lot of factors.
Brandon?
Yeah, any final comments?
So I did
Cynthia?
bring a handout that I put together on Sharrows. I think I should have labeled this information for Sharrow use and placement. And
Okay.
I went through and looked at AASHTO and the MUTCD, and I looked at some research, and I also looked at NACTO, and I talked with Ed Barsati, and he looked at this. And based on the information, there are research results that indicate that Sharrows do increase operating space for bicyclists, that they've reduced sidewalk riding and I think some wrong way riding. They do not, from any of the studies that I've seen, encourage new bicycling. There's no increase in bicycling as a result of Sharrow placement. So it primarily provides information for people who are already willing to bicycle. The factors that they looked at for Sharrow placement included things like lane width, roadway type, vehicle speeds. All of the guides say do not put Sharrows on roads with 35 mile per hour or faster vehicles. And they also say that you should only use sharrows in those locations where other bicycle infrastructure does not fit. So there's also the issue of on-street parking, the usage of the parking, the turnover rate of the parking, and whether or not you're trying to fill a gap. Some places you have an undesirable roadway, but you need to fill it to make a connection. Then there's some information here on placement of them and in the lane itself. And both AASHTO and NACTO say that you should use sharrows where other on-road bike infrastructure is not fit, based upon the AASHTO standards that they provide. There are a couple of graphics I showed here, and then I included the references from those guides. And so those are things that we can look at as we're moving forward. And of course, you know, it really does depend on the circumstances and what we're trying to accomplish on a roadway. And the bike lanes on Illinois have been there for 6 years now. There has been a significant increase in bicycling on that road and no dooring crashes that I am aware of. It's not an ideal layout, but I think it has resulted in reducing vehicle speeds and increasing bicycling. And we have not had any crashes as a result of that design. So I think that probably it's partially a factor of there's not high turnover of the parking in that location during the periods when the bicycle traffic is heavy. Well, but the bicycle traffic is heavy coming in right before 9 and 10 o'clock classes. And then going out, it dribbles. And it goes from 4 to 5:30, and the parking's much lighter then. So it's it really depends on the circumstances of the street.
So that kind of says that Illinois is a little unusual, so we really should think twice before setting up anything else to be like Illinois.
It depends on the road.
Yeah.
It depends on the circumstances.
Like the student
right.
flow versus the car turnover, because,
Yeah, and the turnover rate and the usage rate of the parking.
Yeah. And I think we can also sort of, it says in here where, you want sharrows where other infrastructure wouldn't fit, and I think we need to be
Fit
more
is,
creative.
yeah.
That's what Gary's saying we want to adapt, and I think we should give that some thought of, thinking beyond AASHTO when we talk about fit, and think about hazards.
Yeah, how much fit is considered a safe fit is a tough question.
Well, and remember, on a lot of these streets, we have an existing pavement width that we're
Yeah.
Right.
taking inside of. So
Exactly.
We would love to make bike lanes wider, or but sometimes it's just physically impossible unless you're willing, and it would be obviously very costly to try to extend the width of the pavement. So
Yeah.
the other thing I would caution too is the painted buffers. We're going to struggle financially just to maintain the pavement markings, which have to be
Exactly.
refreshed pretty much every year.
Yeah.
Maybe you could stretch them out to 2 years, but they start getting pretty faded. But just the straight line striping to designate what the bike lane is, or the sharrow markings, that's a constant maintenance thing. So we would recommend to Public Works to try to minimize the amount of pavement markings as much as possible.
So you're saying that the buffer that has the hatching is
You don't
more,
have to put a hatch
is
on
more
it.
costly?
Bottom right here,
Yes.
you don't necessarily need that.
You could just stripe it, not hatch it or something.
Where's the other one?
Sideline lasts longer though because you don't have vehicles moving over.
It's more a function of the
That-
climate than vehicular traffic.
Yeah, a lot of these pictures are from California.
I mean, we're lucky to get more than a year out of a pavement marking.
Mhm.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
the freeze thaw and the heavy periods of heavy rainfall that we get, and the summer heat, they just seem to wear out pretty quickly.
But see, another thing, like just look at this one, for example. If you can't put that extra line there, right, that marks the buffer. Now, this was done really early. I haven't even put the bike symbols yet, it seems, in here. You could eliminate that. I don't like it as much, but you could eliminate that and put your symbols right up against the left side. So at least you're indicating that this is where bicyclists are expected. I like the line better because it's very clear, and there you have your free zone. But it doesn't necessarily have to mean a whole lot more paint.
And the research that I've seen too says that having a narrow parking lane encourages motorists to park closer to the curb. If you make the parking lane too wide, they park farther out. So they're using those lines to estimate where they're supposed to be as well.
Okay, any other comments on this one before we move on? Okay, so there's 2 good handouts, and people should look over those, consider these questions, and we'll be returning to this topic, especially over the coming months as we get more into planning for the future. And one of those streets that Gary had mentioned was Main Street. That's our next topic tonight. So we're going to move on to the Main Street bike lane design. And Gail Jamison is here. I don't know that most people might know Gail, who is the Assistant Director of Public Works and is kind of in charge of all the engineers who stay in the office and do all the drawings and plan out all these projects, people like Brad and the crew there. So, Gail, welcome to the Bike Commission. And
hi there. And I'm actually Assistant City Engineer. We don't have Assistant Public Works Director.
Yes, okay, that's right. Official
but
title.
That's okay. I'll take the promotion if you'd like to give it to me.
I don't know if there's a pay increase that comes with my mistake, though. So.
Well, before I get into all the pretty pictures, what I would, if I can figure out how to operate this thing. I want to go to full screen. Where's it at? View. Full screen mode. There we go. Before I get into the pictures, I want to kind of maybe go over a little update as to where we are with Main Street, and maybe even do a little history. Main Street concept of a road diet started back in 2007, and it was as part of the deliberations and the development of the Bike Master Plan, and it was included in the Bike Master Plan with bike lanes and a 3-lane cross-section or road diet cross-section. We applied, and the master plan was adopted as part of the comp plan in 2008, April 2008. We did an ITEP application in 2008 for the project, and we weren't successful on that application, but in 2010 we did do an ITEP application and were successful in getting $625,000 towards that section of the road diet from Grove Street east to Dewey Street. We did an HSIP, or ITEP is Illinois Transportation Enhancement Project, if for those who are not familiar with some of the acronyms. We did a HSIP, which is Hazardous Safety Improvement Project, Highway Safety Improvement Project for a race and Main Street, and we did receive that grant for signal modernization there. There was a lot of deliberation on the downtown part of Main Street. That took a couple of years to resolve, and I think, if my recollection is correct, in 2010 the council looked at 5 different options and settled on an option for what to do in that stretch of Main Street, mostly between Broadway and Race, where the major concern for parking and the bike lanes occurred. In June of 2011, we selected Clark Dietz to do the design for the project. Because of the intricacies of the funding, we basically have broken this project down into 3 separate projects. We have the signal modernization at Race and Main, which is purely installation of the signals. We have what we call the locally funded project, which is a project that is funded with TIF funds that runs from Cedar to Vine Street. And so that's the locally funded portion. And we have the ITEP portion, which runs from Grove to the eastern limits of the project. We've completed the HSIP design for the Race Street intersection. It's been submitted to IDOT. We are proposing to bid that in April. We've completed the design for the main locally funded portion between Cedar and Vine. That is scheduled to bid sometime around the same time in April. The portion between Grove and Dewey on the eastern part, we've completed the design. We submitted to IDOT. It's under IDOT review at this point in time. I'm currently in the process of gathering information to negotiate 20 temporary construction easements for some of the work, sidewalk work, and we got one permanent easement of 23 square feet on the far east end of the property, our project that we're getting. We have successfully negotiated an easement with the Park District already, so we already have that one in hand. And we're planning on bidding that, scheduled on the IDOT bidding for June. And then the construction would start on all of these pretty much simultaneously, and dodging special events downtown and working around those. We're hoping to have all the construction completed probably around Thanksgiving, somewhere around that order of time with restoration and everything. At least that's the hope right at the moment. Cynthia?
So what did you say on the bidding for the project portion between Race and Vine? I think you went through.
Race and Vine will be bid, we're going to bid that in April also.
Okay.
What we're going to try and do is, because all the flat work and curb work and stuff associated with the Race Street intersection is being done as part of that project.
Okay.
We're going to bid it like a week or so before. We've got signal work on Broadway and Vine, and we're anticipating that whoever gets the one part will probably bid reasonably on the HSIP portion so that they can kind of work all of it together and coordinate it all. So we're playing a little game with the bidding to try and optimize the bids we get and the success for bidding. So, what I've got in these pictures is, and if you take a look at this first set of pictures, these are what was submitted with the ITEP application initially and the HSIP application. This is what Jennifer put together in 2010 as what was proposed for Main Street based on what was in the bike master plan. And as you go through it, you can see she was doing bump out. We were doing bump outs at Broadway and putting the bike lanes in and going to a three-lane section with a left turn lane. We're lining them up at Ray Street so that we don't have that offset now where you've got the blind approach for left turners in the through lanes. So we're taking the median out west of we were planning on taking the median out west of Ray Street. The next section that you see here is starting at Grove Street and going east, and you see a lot of sidewalk work was proposed at that time. A lot of ramp work was proposed at that point in time. A lot of brick sidewalk was being replaced with brick where the residents wanted it. If they didn't want brick, we were then going with a concrete replacement and making everything pretty much ADA compliant throughout this whole route. And that's part of what was eligible for grant funding, was getting the ADA compliance for the pedestrians plus the bike lane improvements. As you can see, this goes to Cottage Grove on this particular set of slides. If you go to the next one here, it's east of Cottage Grove. As you get out into the area near the county complex, basically we were just going with a three-lane section. The bike sidewalks continue on the south side, and on the north side they stop near the Glover, just across from the VFW there. As we continue, there's Learman Avenue on this set of photos, and you can see the bike lanes continuing. Jennifer had proposed a striped median as we got out in this section. And then as we head on farther east towards the east end of the project, we're still doing a three-lane section. There's a rumble strip median out in this particular area. We're removing that. We propose to remove that rumble strip. And you see there's a multi-lane or multi-use pathway along the Park District that we proposed in that stretch. And then as you continue on out, it would end there at Dotson Drive where the sidewalk would end. And then you can see we're continuing the bike lanes all the way out to past Scottswood, and then we blend in and go to Sherrill's, or shared use on the pavement all the way out to University Avenue and transition at that point in time. Okay. Some of the things have changed in the design, and so I'm going to go through some of these plan sheets, and I'll point out some of the things that have changed as we went along and learned a little bit about the design. This is the Race Street and Main Street intersection. We took the median out, and we were concerned about Busey Bank's entrance to their parking lot. We didn't want vehicles exiting that close to the intersection and trying to make that left turn all the way across there. So we worked with Busey, and they were willing to allow us to create a bump out there, which narrows the section a little bit, and to make it a right in only and no exit out of that parking lot on that end. And at the same time, we took a parking space on the north side, and we wanted to try and square up that crosswalk in the narrower section. So we took a parking space out on the north side, extended a bump out farther to the west so that we could tie that crosswalk in and make right there where my hand's at. See,
That's where you lengthened that bump out
we
further
just took
west.
a parking space out there and lengthened the bump out so that we can make this crosswalk more at a 90 degrees. Right now it kind of cuts across at an angle because of the offset in the intersection. And then here's Busey's right in, right out that we created on that end. The other thing we're doing on the intersection, which is not new because we didn't have those details when we did the grant application, if you look down here on Ray Street where the bike lane comes up, we're putting a traffic loop in that bike lane. And one of our traffic signal technicians spent a lot of time in the shop laying out different orientations of bike loops to try and figure out what the optimum that might work. And so that's what they're basing the loop.
About that, have you looked at optical detection instead?
We've looked at optical detection, but we don't have any optical detection at all down here. And in this whole project, it's all loops. It's loops now, and it's going to be loops in the future. I know Brad is looking at optical detection on the Philo and Florida intersection, but we're not using optical detection down here. We're going to use loops. Yes.
There's no right turn on Wren here all the way around the intersection, isn't that correct?
Right now there is, yes. And it's not proposed to change that, no. There's some visibility issues here, and we don't want turning in that intersection. This is just shows a little bit more of what we're proposing with ramp work and the crosswalk changing over on this corner. These two corners here were done as part of the streetscape work, and the ramps are ADA compliant, so we're not touching those two corners with any of the work, but we're redoing these two corners here. This is the Broadway Avenue intersection. Jennifer had shown bump outs on the corners in Broadway, so we're doing bump outs and redoing the ramps. We're getting rid of the slick brick on these corners down here where we have the slick brick, and we're putting concrete in. We're matching the streetscape as we have everywhere else along here, and then redoing the ramps. Ramps is ADA compliant. Here again, we are not proposing any loops on the for the signals east and west. The lights will dwell on Main Street. And so we're going to put bike loops both on the north and the south legs of Broadway in the bike lanes too.
Oh, explain the dwell more. The dwell means it'll just stay green
It'll
on
stay
Main
green
Street.
on Broadway unless there's a call from the adjacent, the minor streets, and Broadway's a minor street in this particular scheme. And so when a car would come up on the loops on Broadway, they would call for the signal, and then it would cycle through. Same thing with the bikes. It would come up on Broadway, but normally it'll dwell on green on the main street.
So, Gail, are you saying there's a special kind of detection for the bicycles, or is it just an additional detector?
We're going to use a bike loop. It's a special, and it's a special
So-
configuration
So
of
what
loops.
what if a bicyclist is on the minor road and wants to turn left? Then will they be detected by the loops?
No.
So
Well,
they'll
they
have to-
may be detected by the vehicle loops, but
Okay.
that's less than reliable in some instances, but they can be detected by the vehicle loops.
So we can't use a bicycle loop in that lane as well?
No, you can't, because they conflict. And the way these are set up, we have to have a special receiver and amplifier for these bike lanes to be able to pick up those loops.
Okay. So you can't do a bike and a vehicle loop.
They conflict in the signal.
But what if you only did the bike one? Would it know there was a car there?
That would be,
I don't know
No.
the answer to that
I'm just
question. I can
curious.
find that out for you.
Well,
Might not like it very much.
right.
well, if it's a bike loop and you put the car there, won't it
Will
trigger?
will
Won't the
will
car trigger?
I don't know the answer to that question.
That's a good question.
I just.
I can find out.
I
I
mean,
would
always
hate, I think that if we set it up and there's a bicyclist wanting to turn left and they have a red light and it doesn't trigger, then we're encouraging them to ignore the signal. That's my concern.
Most of the vehicle loops in town, if you position your bicycle on them properly, they are triggered. I haven't had very many, and when we've complained, they've been adjusted so that they do detect the bikes, unless you're riding a carbon bike or something that will not be detected. So we could put the symbol for where that is for left-turning vehicles over the vehicle line. Yeah.
I'm not an expert on that, so I don't know the answer to the question, but I can definitely find out for you, and I'll let you know. This section here is basically that we're looking at the pavement markings that'll go along with this section between Cedar Street, which is right here, and Vine Street in this section here. As you can see, we start the bike lanes at Cedar. It's a dashed line that goes into the bike lanes, starting right about here after the Y. And that bike lane then continues outside here, outside the right turn to Busey, and here's the bike lane on this side going that direction. And this is where it starts breaking into the dash line, and the bike then would go back in to share the lanes or share the roadway west of there. Until we do something different with Springfield Avenue and Main Street, there's not room enough to have bike lanes on those streets with the buses and the biking on there, and the parking on there. We're going to redo the crosswalk here at mid-block and restripe it. We've got 3 lanes here, and I know we've got 11-foot travel lanes. And I was trying to...
Will we have the signs that say stop for pedestrians here as well? Because no one stops for pedestrians there currently.
The mid-block crossing there.
We should have some signs there. If they're not there now, we will have some. We can put signs there. So basically, you got your left turn lane here and left turn lane here. They are opposite each other so that they don't block the view of the through lanes. And I'm just talking to Ms. Charlie a little bit, and we can look at narrowing driver through lanes and turn lanes here and give a little more room to the bikes and this to maybe move, give a better width there. I said these are done, but we can change. That's a change you can make during construction. It's not going to affect the bid price because the amount of paint's the same on the pavement. Here again is the Broadway Avenue intersection. You can see the bike lanes coming up and the bump outs coming out just so the bike lanes. And here again, we can do some adjustment of lane widths on these if we want to gain a little more space in the bike lanes. But we won't go any less than 10 foot, and 10 foot will pretty much slow the traffic down. At the crossing, the infamous crossing to the courthouse here off of Walnut will be made one-way north. We'll do bump outs to narrow that throat down there. There'll be angle parking going northbound on Walnut, yes.
Have you considered back-in angle parking on Walnut?
We considered that. That was deliberated long and hard as part of the council's deliberations back in 2010, and determined it was better to be one-way north and have straight-in angle parking. There's no bike traffic on Walnut. And there's no reason really to have a back-end parking on that.
Oh, back-in parking has all kinds of benefits, but that's not for now.
We did deliver that.
I mean,
That was
they
part of the
delivered
whole
it. I mean,
city
it was
council
several months of
and all these
discussion, I think.
options. Yeah.
I had 5 different options, and
Yeah.
a lot of them.
We ended
We
up
did
with-
look at angle parking on Water Street. We looked at angle parking on Broadway. So we've looked at it on a lot of streets to try and gain more spaces downtown for some that were thought were needed. We're building a raised median at this point to give a refuge for the people crossing to the courthouse. And then we're trying to, and we got an angle through here to get people to look in the direction of traffic coming, and we've narrowed it down with a bump out. So it's a lot safer situation there, and we've narrowed this crossing down with the bump outs also. We're not doing many changes at Vine Street. We're changing the mast arm length and signal mast arm over here because we need it longer to get these offset lanes, get it centered on the offset lanes like it's supposed to be. Again, we got the bike lanes. At Vine Street, because Vine Street is the primary street, we will have bike loops in the bike lanes here on Main Street at this point, so that if it dwells on Vine, then they can get the call from. And here again, may have the same issue with left turns here as you have back on the other streets, and we can look at that. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, they turn. Yeah. Okay, so. This is the ITEP portion. It starts at just at Grove Street here, and actually starts a little bit west of Grove, over towards Maple Street, and it goes to the east. We've eliminated parking on the north side, even though we haven't posted it yet. In 2010, the council voted to remove the parking. We've just been holding off on this project to actually post it. We'll have parking on the south side. We'll shift the center line of the street over. We'll have the 3 lanes. We've lengthened some of these dash zones at the various streets to give them more evidence for the drivers that they can cross that. Where they're real short, they won't cross them, but we've made them dash longer in some of these sections.
Also, Gail, for the buses, the 100 feet is
they can
really
pull over,
important.
Yeah, and we lengthened that in most of these areas. We see they're a lot longer here at Lynn Street. These are, I think they're over 100 feet, maybe 110 feet, something like that.
They can be 200 feet.
They may be, I don't know what the distance is here. What's the scale up here is an inch to, yeah, I think they're about 100 feet. If you put 200 feet at these intersections, you're just dashing the lines all the way from one corner to the other. So and then there's Cottage Grove, and we've got carrying the bike lanes through Cottage Grove with the parking on the south. This is a right turn lane here, and that's dashed clear back here for people to get into that right turn lane, cross over the bike lane back here and into the right turn lane. Actually, the right turn lane was carried back longer to make that more obvious. I hope you guys can see this on your monitors there. It's pretty small on this one. Then we go to, here's Poplar Street. The Poplar Street goes north there. There's Glover. We're carrying the bike lanes along.
And
we still got parking
okay.
to just west of Glover on the south side. There's a stretch between Poplar and just west of Cottage Grove. There's no parking because of the turn lanes. So we're carrying that parking through. Then we get to Hardall. Still, again, we got the 2 lanes with a little striped median and the bike lanes along the edge. There's no parking east of Cottage Grove or east of Glover on either side of the street. So as you come across, there's railroad tracks there, and you're going along, and you've got the 2 lanes with the bike lanes. There's no left turn lane in this stretch because it wasn't wide enough to get the left turn lanes in here. The left turn lanes start up again basically east of Learman. Here at Learman, we've done something a little bit different. We are, rather than carry the bike lanes along the side of the right turn lane, we basically drop the bike lanes back here, dash the line, and then we put sharrows in the right turn lane. The bicyclists, when they go through this intersection, rather than having a bike lane to ride in out next to the cars, will actually move over and share the right turn lane with the right turning vehicles.
That's illegal.
Not according to our standards. We got that from MIDOT, so you can do it that way, so.
It's illegal to go through a right turn lane. You cannot use a right turn lane to continue through. And they were going to do this on John Street, and they're not doing it now.
But Gary, how can that be if some lanes have the straight arrow and the turn arrow?
If it's a dual destination lane, fine.
So I think that's what this is.
It isn't. It's a right turn lane. It's a right turn only lane, using the marking for a right turn only lane. And the cyclist who does that legally, that's illegal.
Well, our consultant debated it with IDOT, and they've signed off on it, so we're doing it that way, so.
But then you'd be encouraging cyclists to do something illegal, which is to continue through on right turn lanes. So I'm opposed to that.
Why couldn't it be in the through lane instead? The sharrows could be in the through lane. The volume's pretty
Because you're
low
moving the
there.
bikes across the right turners if you put, so we're keeping the bikes with the right turners. They can ride to the left. That's where the sharrows were at.
Mhm.
They're on the left edge of this lane. They ride through on the left, and then they merge back into the bike lanes on the far side of Learman. And
We did, when we discussed it on John Street, there was a concern about people being confused, and I think if we do it without any additional signage or, yeah, so you have the right, you have
There-
right turn lane, must turn right except bikes.
Yeah, so we've got the signage there. And we put the sharrows over to the left of that lane so that they would ride to the left side of that lane. And that lines up with the bike lanes on the far side. And
This right turn lane is mostly heavily used is when there are shift changes. Is that my impression was
Yeah.
that there's shift work at the
At-
factory?
At factory, yeah, it's not used very much other than.
The rest of the
at
time,
those
it's not
times,
used
yeah.
very much. So this was part of your thinking on allowing the bicyclists, and it also, because it lines up with the bike lane on the other.
Right, and
side.
we looked at the standards, and it is allowed, design is allowed with the standards.
Okay.
Okay. And maybe with that signage, maybe that
Okay.
helps make it legal or clarify. So.
Okay,
Okay.
east of there, we've got the transitions. Then we go into the wider section of pavement over here, just west of Art Bartel, or east of Art Bartel, where it widens out into that section with the center rumble strip. And so we're shifting the bike lanes over. There's no parking here, but we're actually putting a buffer on the outside of the lanes because that road's so wide. So we've actually narrowed down and got rid of the center median that Jennifer had shown striped. Yeah, the right buffered from here to the east. We have, you can see it on the top and the bottom. We've got Brad's crosshatches that he doesn't like in there, but we're right buffering both lanes in that stretch, and basically did that by getting rid of the wider lanes out there. So, and so it's carried. So we have right buffer on that. There's no parking there, but it allows a little more room for the bikes to get away from the cars if they hear one approaching from behind them. Here's one major difference is originally we showed a nice straight path right along the right-of-way in the Park District. We couldn't get right-of-way from the Park District, so we worked an agreement and an easement with them. They wanted a path to be more in concert with their pathways that they proposed in their master plan. So we actually meander in and out a little bit into the Park District. We got a couple of bench locations here that we're providing as part of the construction. Actually, the Park District is paying for 3 foot of the width of this, so we can get an 8-foot wide path in there. IDOT will only pay for 5 foot, and the Park District has agreed to pay for 3 foot there. Then, so we're carrying the buffered bike lanes all the way through, continuing buffered bike lanes. And then when we get close to, we still got a little buffer, but when we get close to Dotson, those buffers get narrower and narrower. So we're basically back to pretty much the bike lanes and the 3-lane section. And then as you get east of Scottswood here, the 3-lane section goes away. We've got a striped median east of Dotson, and it's basically back to 2-lane with it, and the bikes will share the lanes out to University. And that's not in the city, so we don't I haven't done anything with that yet, so.
Where, if the Kickapoo Trail is built, this has the potential of providing connection to that. Is that not correct?
Well, one potential connection's at Smith Road, because the railroad ends at the west side of Smith Road. The rails end west of there. And so if the trail would start there, you could actually go up Smith Road. We'd probably have to do shared lanes on Smith Road because it's not wide enough to put a bike lane or side path in. So they would go up Smith Road and catch it there. The other alternative, as you go out farther east on Main Street, where Main Street goes straight and it curves around to University Avenue, there might be a possibility of going on straight on out Main Street and going in through the subdivision there, through Tapman subdivision or the industrial park there, and tying into it that way. We'd have to work some kind of deal with the industrial park, but that'd be a possibility.
I know that's a long way off, but that would be absolutely thrilling
Sure.
to be able to bicycle through Urbana and access the Kickapoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a summary of the project funding and expenditures. The signal improvements at Main and Race, the estimated project costs are $287,000. We got a 90% HSIP grant to cover 90% of the cost. We're funding funded part of the design with TIF funds because we wanted to avoid long delays with IDOT reviews, and the rest is with state motor fuel tax. Our 10% is state motor fuel tax. The Cedar to Vine Street, which includes Broadway Avenue and Ray Street resurfacing, it includes Broadway from Water to Elm, and it includes Ray Street from just south of Greg's, where the Boneyard project stops, all the way to Elm Street. Now, Ray Street from Elm to the south to California is scheduled for resurfacing this summer too. So we're going to do the road diet and bike lanes on Ray Street from California down to tie into the lanes that we have on north of Elm Street as part of this project. That project is $1.35 million for that work, and that includes all the ramp work, the sidewalk work, the milling, resurfacing, striping, the signal work, and that is mostly funded out of TIF and local motor fuel taxes funding a resurfacing of Broadway and Ray Street outside the Main Street limits, and the capital replacement and improvement fund, which I've so used to call an A09, I forgot what its real name was. It will fund some of it, some of the shortfall from the TIF funding, where we spent it on design elsewhere. And the ITEP project from Grove Street to Dewey Street, that estimated project cost is a little over $2.4 million. That's been funded by the $625,000 ITEP grant. Local motor fuel tax, we paid for some of the engineering out of the local motor fuel tax to avoid early on delays in the programming phase with IDOT, and the remainder will be funded by the state motor fuel tax funds. So, and as you see the bid dates, April 2013, I think that's the 23rd of April is the IDOT letting date, and this is on the IDOT. It'll be an IDOT letting for the signals. We'll try and do the Cedar to Vine a week before that, and then in June, middle of June, was be the bid letting for the ITEP portion of the project. So it'll be a busy summer. We've scheduled the milling and resurfacing on the Cedar to Vine part to wait till after sweet corn, so that they can't do any milling and resurfacing. They can do curb work and signal work and stuff like that, but no milling and resurfacing until after sweet corn's over with. We've had to shuffle a few special events around that occur after that, just get them onto Elm Street or other streets where we're not going to be working, because there's no guarantee we won't have it milled up and be resurfacing when those want to happen. It's a lot of information. I apologize for the quality of those plan sheets, but I had about 200 of them, and I had to pick out 10 or 15 of them that tried to represent what was going on in the project. There's some changes from what was proposed in the original ITAP based on some of the decisions made during design. And there's probably some things we can still look at as we go into construction as far as lane widths and things like that if we want to make some shifts.
Any other questions or comments for Gail? Cynthia first. We'll go this way.
Well, I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled that we're going to have this project done so soon. The only comment that I would make is in those locations where we do not have bus routes or significant truck traffic, 10-foot lanes seem reasonable to me in slow traffic. I don't know all of your dimensions. But in those places where we can give any extra space to bike lanes by narrowing down that, I think that's a...
Yeah, Main Street has buses all the way. This whole stretch
Yes.
has buses.
Yes.
They come
No.
off of Broadway, they turn left,
Absolutely.
they go west. They don't go eastbound except east of Broadway. They turn east and they go all the way out to
Right.
the end. So
Right.
this is a bus route the whole stretch. Broadway's a bus route also.
Which is why I made that comment.
And
Buses
so
have to have at least 11 feet.
In looking at lane widths, that all has to be taken into consideration. One of the things mentioned was going to a narrow turn lane. That's not a problem, except when buses are making that turn, they take a lot of room too. So we can look at all of that. They looked at vehicle turning radiuses and stuff to come up with a lot of the bump out dimensions, things like that. So they're pretty close to as narrow as you can get them, but well, we can always.
I wasn't saying you hadn't already maximized that, just
Yeah.
that where we can, I think
Yeah.
that's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Jennifer did an awful lot of this when she was doing the analysis for the ITAP project and stuff like that. So, and our consultants redid a lot of it because they changed some of the dimensions on the bump outs to accommodate different.
The turning
a little bit
radiuses
bigger
for
vehicles.
buses, yeah.
Yeah, and the buses and everything. So,
Gary?
Yeah, probably like on Cynthia's, when I was doing this effective bike lane width, it was finding out that just narrowing the travel lane and making the bike lane a little wider doesn't give them any more room from close passing traffic. It's the same. It doesn't push back the Red Sea. It doesn't do that. The only way, if you fix curb to curb, the only way that you're going to get more effective width is to narrow the center turn lane. That's the only way that you can do it. So if that can be made 10 feet wherever, that will show up on both sides as 1 foot more, well, a half on each side, effective lane.
Yeah.
The others may look fine, but going from 10 to 11 just moves
Gives-
the line over, and the Red Sea is still there. It's just the same spot.
That- Well,
as before.
I have some differences with you on your interpretations there.
Well, okay, but I would think just that to follow. I like to get, obviously, I want to calculate the effective bike lane width on all these sections, and so can I get that, or are these now decided what they're going to be? Is it still?
the plans are done. They're submitted to IDOT for review. This is what it's going to be. It is consistent with a bike master plan. So we're not doing anything that's not policy with the city right at the moment on these plans.
I understand
I
that, but
appreciate all your discussion about the effective width, and I think you've got some very substantial fodder for discussion as you go into updating the bike master plan, which is scheduled for next year. I think that's where these need to be deliberated because it will have a significant impact on what streets you can and cannot put bike lanes on.
Yeah.
Sorry for the
But in-
editorial, but that's
right. And but in terms of this project, the documents will be bid this way in April and June, but they're available. I mean, so
Oh,
Gary,
yeah.
if you want to get copies and see what the widths are in the segments, you totally
Oh,
can.
sure.
And I think what Gail said is right, that if in any spots in there anybody has feedback about a place where the center turn lane could go from 11 to 10 or something, those are tweaks that staff can still make
we would
after
take-
bid
we'd-
letting.
Yeah, we'd make any tweaks like that
And that
during
does make a
construction.
difference for the bicyclists.
Yeah.
So I'd say, you should talk to Gail and try to get a copy of those.
But we're
And-
not changing the plans at this
Right.
point in time. They're
Right.
ready for bid and they're going out to bid.
But you
If
could-
there's something we can look at during construction to tweak, we're willing
Right.
to look
Like
at
a
that.
change order where you say, you know what, move this 6 inches,
It's
move
not a
this
change
foot.
order to move it. It's a
Okay.
field order because it doesn't change the quantities. There's no additional
Okay.
cost.
Okay.
If we can work it out, and we're
Okay.
open to those comments.
Yeah.
But I'm not changing the plans at this stage in the game because they have been virtually
Yeah.
approved by IDOT and ready for
But
construction.
narrowing the center turn lane is changing the plans or not changing the plans?
I am not changing the plans to go out to bidding because it doesn't make a substantial
Okay.
change in
Right, okay.
quantities, so my numbers will be the same. I can look at that during construction and do a
Okay.
field order if it is
Okay.
deemed advisable to narrow those lanes
So,
down.
yeah.
Yeah, so
The
looking
one-
at the plans now
Yeah.
and telling me we want 10-foot lanes doesn't do anything as
For
far
the
as
bid
changing it
docs.
prior to
Okay.
bidding, no.
But I would like to calculate those so that we can perhaps make some little changes in the field then.
For
The
construction.
changes are going to be you'll gain 6 inches in bike lane width
I'll take it.
if it's allowable to go to 10-foot
Yeah,
turn
I mean,
lane.
it'd have to work, the other geometrics would all have
Yeah,
to work out, but,
But I
Because
would
nothing
ju-
else is going to change on the width of the
Okay.
streets.
yeah.
But I'd like the data, that's all I'm saying. I want to know what these cross-sections are in all these, including the curb, the gutter pan widths. I'd like to know what that is.
Yeah. That's totally reasonable, yeah, I think that's all known at this point.
Okay,
And I don't know that we measured the gutter pan, so if you want to know what that is, you'll have to go out and measure it.
so they wouldn't
Yeah.
change from what's there?
No,
Okay.
That-
we're not
That'll stay.
changing
The pavement.
anything on the street dimensions. All we're doing is going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes
Right,
with
okay.
bike lanes and
Yeah.
restriping.
Okay.
That's all we're doing.
Yeah.
We're not changing curbs. As a matter of fact, we're not replacing the curbs anywhere.
Yeah, well, you're pulling
Unless
out
it's-
rumble medians.
We're
That-
doing what?
Pulling out the rumble medians,
Yes.
that's the major reconstruction that you do.
Yeah, that'll be-
Yeah, we're pulling out
And-
the Brumble medians, which
Yeah.
are east of Art Bartel.
Yeah, and using that right buffer is great. I mean,
Yeah.
that will make
Yeah.
things better.
Yeah, rather than create a striped median in the middle, we decided to
Yeah.
stripe it on the outside and give it a little more space
Yeah.
on the bike
And
lane.
that allows even maybe 2 people riding side by side or somebody with a child, they could be in
Yeah.
that buffer. It also provides better sight lines at every intersection.
Sure.
By having them further left. So taking it from the center, I mean, it's the same idea. Center turn lane, make it small as you can, get rid of any buffer in the center, move it out to the sides. That's what's gonna help.
Yep.
That's
My-
I
only
think they've crammed about as much as they could cram into the
Yeah.
space we had available on most of this,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and did it with pretty good sound judgment, or we had good consultants on this one.
My only final comment, and again, this may not be something you can change now or even as a field order, and maybe it's just something we consider as policy for the future, but the only lingering thing I'm left thinking is a little odd is that weird situation where we do the sharrows and get the bikes into the right turning lane. And even if IDOT's okay with it and even if it's legal, it is something I think we need to consider for the future, whether that should be our pattern that we follow elsewhere or not, simply because it does kind of teach the cyclist to, yeah, it teaches the cyclist a kind of bad habit, which is stay over by the right curb of the road, you know, or get in the right turn lane even if you're not turning right. Whereas we really want to try hard, I think, to teach cyclists that when you're going through the intersection, you need to merge left. You know, you need to be, if you were over in a bike lane, but now you need to get in a through lane, that you, the cyclist, need to look over your left shoulder and move yourself left and really get yourself aligned in the through lane to have a straight, clear shot across so that you're not kind of zigzagging in weird spots. But I know here, yeah, I know here that's a slightly different alignment, but
Yeah.
it still is weird to teach the cyclist to get,
What we did is originally the bike lane went straight through just to the left of the right turn lane.
yeah,
And basically, we eliminated the bike lane, widened the right turning lane out so it's wider, because the right turn lane is a right turn lane plus the bike lane width there. And we put sharrows on the left-hand side of that lane. So we basically just eliminated the bike lane, which was there on the left-hand side to begin with of the right turn
Yeah.
lane, and made the right turn lane wider and allowed the bikes to share the lane. And it was acceptable to do that in the AASHTO and IDOT standards if you made that lane wider, which is what we did.
And
Okay.
it's also possible, you know, like we come to it from a riding perspective. It may be that, I mean, I know a lot of people are just, the whole idea of this being between 2 lanes of traffic at the same time is unthinkable. And so this might actually be an encouraging thing to, instead of hugging the lane, to say, no, get out, so, you know, get used to the idea of, no, sometimes drivers are to the right of you, and just get used to that idea. So it may end up being a good idea. You know, hard to tell. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's, you know,
Yeah,
I
we-
think it's, especially in, this is such a peculiar place with
It is
the
a
other
weird alignment.
dynamics
Yeah.
too.
We had some real concerns about the vehicles crossing the bike lane to get to the right turn lane. It's a safety issue, and I've seen it in Champaign on State Street at Springfield when if, luckily there's no bicycles coming based on what I've seen drivers going across that bike lane. And so we had some concerns about the safety of the vehicles crossing the bike lane, and we're more comfortable with the bikes moving over to the left and going straight through than we were necessarily with the cars trying to go across the bike lane. So that was kind of a long discussed topic for that intersection as to how we handle that.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
another, I understand how it lines up. In Ashto, I've never seen that anywhere, in Ashto 2012.
I will have Craig Schonkweiler look up the reference. I'll dig it out. And
In
get
the
it to
bike
you.
facilities guide?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I got it here, and I've never seen it. But the basic idea, if someone is going straight on a bicycle, they should be able to, and this is what you're trying to do, continue straight.
Yeah.
Somebody who's going to make a right turn, they're the one who has to merge, has to look, has to yield, make a change. That's the basic idea. You shouldn't make a cyclist who's going straight have to merge back in. They were already in the
Well,
two lane.
the
So in this
bicyclist-
case, that's what you're doing.
Bicycles is going straight. in
I
this.
understand that,
Yeah.
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 It's just that it would be better if it was lined up for the left, and so it was clear that the motorists had to come over. But I understand why you're trying to line it up there. I just have never seen it in Ashto, and anyway.
We have a reference, and I may have misspoke. It may not be in Asheville, but it was in one of the references that we looked up
Yeah,
on
I'd like to see that, where
Okay.
it is.
how to do it. So.
Okay, any other comments for Gail? Thank you for going through the details. This is a
Yeah.
really exciting project,
If you
and I know
have,
we.
if you have any questions, give me a yell at work. It's 384-2343, and I'll attempt to answer them.
Okay.
I notice there's a lot of stuff I threw out, and it's been a kind of a massive project trying to coordinate 6 engineering services agreements and
Yeah.
3 projects. But
and
we're getting
6
it done.
different pots of money and 3 different bid lettings and all this. Yeah.
I like to spend money, but man, this is confusing. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you,
Said,
Gail.
give me a call if you have any questions, and I'll try
Okay.
and get some information for you, Gary, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks, Gail. Okay, then our last new business item tonight is the Safe Routes to School Grant Bike Facilities Project, and Brad has a report on how
I
all.
didn't know if, in the interest of time, since we're in an hour and a half, if you wanted to go this the next meeting, or I'd offer that option to the.
Yeah, I know one person had to leave already. She came up to me and said, it's been an hour and a half. I've got to
Does
get my.
that create
my
any
kids to
issues
bed."
for you in terms of timing for this and
No, I mean,
bid
the
letting?
work would probably be completed till June, so, and kind of similar to Gail's project, I mean, the drawings have already been submitted to IDOT. We can make layout changes in the field, so, for example, where the Cheryl was located, right now it shows 4 foot off the edge of pavement. I mean, we could easily in the field, make that 11 feet or whatever the final determination is. So, we have that ability. If we discuss that at the April meeting, it would still be plenty of time to incorporate that into a field change.
Yeah, maybe it's worth.
So we
if
have more
it's
time.
It's a beefy enough project. It's worth giving it the time it deserves. Are
I-
other people comfortable if we
Sure.
save that one till the
I'll
April?
leave the plans up on the website.
Yeah.
Okay.
So people can look at it between now and the next meeting, and if
Okay.
you have any questions, I know Gary has emailed me some stuff. If you have any questions or comments on it,
Okay.
go ahead and email me.
Well,
between now.
I will say, I printed the plans you had posted out, and I circulated them around at MTD, and because we do have bus routes on a number of the locations, Kinch also. And there are no issues or concerns because in those areas, all of the bus stops are essentially at the corners. And as long as we dash the lines back 100 feet, that provides enough space for merging and
Which is what we want. do it the 100-foot
Yeah,
spacing.
Yeah.
on this one.
so.
Okay.
And excuse me, if I want to see those flow line things, I just need to go to Kinch? You're not going to be changing that? That's going to be the same?
Yeah, we're not, on the safe routes to school, I mean, there's no pavement work whatsoever.
Okay. So any question I have about a location of gutter pans and all, I just need to go and look at it. And
We're not changing the existing.
okay, okay.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, Gail, before you leave, for the Race Street project, in order to have the beat pack, take a look at that before it goes out to bid, you think that's something we could put on the April agenda, or do you think you need it earlier?
Do you mean Race Street or Safe Routes to Schools?
That's the Ray Street south of Washington, there by the school.
That's probably a little more time critical.
Yeah. Because we want to bid that so the construction starts as soon as school's out. So we're probably bidding it in May. I mean, it doesn't have bike lanes on it. It's just, all we're doing is bump outs for the buses to pull over out of the travel lane in front of the school. So we're actually widening the street out to handle the bus parking. There's no bike lanes on it. We're doing ADA improvements on the sidewalks. We're making a carriage walk on the west side, so it's a 6-foot walk because the edge of the walk's up against the curb. So we want to do a 6-foot walk in those instances. We got a lot of right-of-way on the west side of the street, but most of it's in landscaping because people have planted clear out to the sidewalk. So we're working on that. And we're doing some improvements to the sidewalk on the east side there by the school. We're moving some street lights over to accommodate the bus pullouts.
And keeping the parking on both sides?
There's no parking on Ray Street in that stretch.
You're talking about Race Street right at the high school where all the MTD buses.
Right, the high school
There's parking on the east side.
Nope. Well, yeah, there is some parking on the east side. On south of there.
By
yeah.
Michigan and near
Yeah,
Michigan.
There's
a lot
some
of
parking between Michigan and the school on the east side, and we'll leave that parking
So
there.
there's no changing in parking.
No.
So what would it take to get Sharrows and Bikes May Use Full Lane on that? That's a perfect
I
spot
don't know
for it.
what's called for in the bike plan. I think it may be shared use or it's a route.
Yeah, I
Can you
don't
check?
remember if that's a
We can do
designated
whatever's
route.
called for in the bike plan at that time, but I don't believe it's not wide enough for bike lanes in that stretch, so. And it's not a good location with the school. If you wanted to put Sharrows or call it a route and let the bikes use the lanes in that stretch, I don't know if that'd be a problem. I think it may be a route since we have bike lanes that come up to Michigan or Pennsylvania. I can't remember where
Well,
they come to.
that would be ideal, I mean. But that could happen, or we'd have,
Is it a share of the road?
share the road is not being used anymore. I mean, people don't know what that means. That means, to motorists, it means cyclists get out of the way. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't use.
I think what that means is that it would, that we could put Sharrows there.
That'd be great.
The problem is the Sharrows would almost need to be in that oncoming lane. It's such a narrow road.
Well, we'll have two full
You
traffic
just
lanes.
automatically stay way back away from the cars.
You put a Sharrow in the center of the lane, or
Yeah, it's like.
That's what you'd have to
you
do.
You wouldn't want to tell people, oh, on this side you're on this share, on this side you're on that one. It's extremely narrow.
Put it between the wheel tracks of the car.
we can do whatever's consistent with the master plan in that stretch and do it however we need to do it with share the road. Okay.
And on Share the Road segments, we sign it and we sometimes Sharrow it. Is that the correct? I know when we wrote the plan, we didn't have Sharrows, but in the meantime,
Yes, we did, because we had, that's right, that's how we ended up with them on South Philo.
Yeah. They have Sharrows on Philo
Yes,
Road.
we did.
And not in specific spots, just as a general
No,
tool
we
that
did
could be
have them in
used.
specific spots. We had them on Philo, South Philo.
6 to 9
Mm-hmm,
on the master plan.
yeah.
well, so Brad, was this part of your overall Safe Route to School topic? Was this particular segment? And
No, I was.
Do you-
No,
talking about
it's
that part.
not.
oh, okay, okay.
No. we're just looking if we, I guess I was thinking whether we need a March meeting or not.
Okay.
Kind of moving ahead to the next
Yeah.
agenda.
I mean,
The presentation will be just the plans, which will show, and it's a 2-block, or about 3-block section there by the school. It's
Yeah.
total reconstruction, taking the street out and reconstructing in concrete. And then we'll do the bus pullouts on the east side so that we can get the buses. Right now, the
Okay.
buses park in the travel lane, so anybody northbound when school's getting out or has to drive in the opposing lane
Yeah.
to get there. And
so is it better for you if we look at that project in March and have a March meeting, or is it fine to wait till April? We can.
we'd probably, with the plans would be done in April. I mean, you'll just see, it'll just be an informational meeting in April. And to be honest with you, we're probably not going to, it's a striping issue if you put sharrows down, so we're not going to change the plans. So April would probably be okay to show you what the final plans are. And then I can talk to Craig, who's doing that. But I guess right now it's a share the road, which is signage, and it's not striping on the pavement. And if we want something different, then we'd have to.
But Share the Road does show the sharrows.
Does it show the
Yeah,
sharrows?
it does, and shared lane markings. Well, we have Share the Road in there, but MUTCD doesn't have that sign anymore. And so that particular, I think we're going to have to adjust that, the Share the Road and the sharrows, because that sign's no longer there.
We don't have a problem putting sharrows in there if that's what the commission would
I think we need to
suggest.
discuss it.
Yeah, I think it's worth discussing. So, I guess if timeliness doesn't matter, then an April meeting is fine, as long as that our next meeting would then be April 16th, if that's okay with people.
Yeah, to be
Otherwise,
honest with you, our crews might paint the sharrows on there because they're doing the bike symbols. So it might be something
Yeah.
you build the road and then our crews come back in and paint the sharrows on
when the project's over.
when the project's done. If that's so from timeliness, it's not going to impact the bidding one way or the other.
We're
Where
all
the
so
contract-
passionate, we'll show up and paint those sharrows. Just let
Well,
us know. Show us when to be there.
We're not losing any flexibility by not meeting in March. That's what I want to
Yeah.
make sure.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
think so on this project. No. Yeah.
No, Brad, do you know if
Limited to the safe routes to school and the
And
ratio,
that
we've
project.
gotta be able to cover those.
that's one good, solid meeting right there.
So you're doing that in March or April?
Let's do that in April.
okay.
Then we'll stick with our normal pattern of every other month. Okay. Well, then maybe we don't need to do anything further tonight on this Safe Routes to School project. We'll have that on the next meeting agenda with the race segment. Any other announcements or anything people wanted to share tonight before we're done? Cynthia?
Yes, as many of us know, May is National Bike Month.
Mhm.
We have a lot of events and activities being planned for May, and I wanted to at least just raise awareness of some of those. So we have Bike to Work, which has probably been announced previously on May 1st. We have Bike to School Day, May 8th. May 4th, there will be a Traffic Skills 101 class. That's a class you have to register for. It will be an all-day class, and we'll be using MTD conference room for that. May 18th, there will be a bike rodeo at Market at the Square that morning, and we will have Bike to Market every Saturday that month. We're going to have a Bike to Worship one day. What else am I missing here? Is there any other already scheduled events? I know that Gary has a class planned as well, and I don't know what else we have planned.
There are other things planned.
Are they on our CU Bike to Work Day website yet? Okay.
Ideally, all of those things should show up on cubiking.org, which is the monster calendar, everything going on.
Yeah.
So I have access to some of that, so we just got to make sure that we punch it in there, because there's a lot going on. And I'm doing a cycling stabbing course, which will be April 25th, probably at ARC on campus, 6:30 to 9:30, and that's a classroom course, and it will be free. It'll be part of Earth Week events, so that'll be the
Great.
next chance to do the Cycling Savvy course.
Yeah, we sent somebody every Saturday.
Sorry?
We referred somebody to Saturday, Sundays by
Oh,
Sunday.
oh, the 4,000 people?
No, this is 16-year-old.
Oh, okay.
That's great.
Okay, fine.
That's great. Rebecca?
At the last meeting, I mentioned the bicycle diversion program that we were starting with the police department. So that is when a bicyclist is ticketed for a violation, they would have an option to take a bicycle education and safety course instead of just paying the fine. And that's moving along, so that will be in place for this spring when the majority of bicyclists are back on the streets. And right now we're envisioning it that the bicyclist gets a $100 fine, and they would have the option of paying that $100 fine, of paying a $30 fine instead and registering for the course. And then as long as they actually take the course, the rest of the fine would be waived, or appearing in court. And so right now we think that that there would only be a handful of students in the spring and the fall that would actually receive tickets and prefer to take the education course. So we imagine that there'll be one course in the spring and one course in the fall for this. And so we should have more information on it shortly. But the police department is going ahead with this, and it should be ready for this spring.
That's great. And that's a joint effort with the campus police and Champaign Police too, right?
So we are creating it, the city of Urbana, and Lieutenant Bob Fitzgerald is the one that is working on it. I'm working with him. And the University of Illinois Police and Champaign Police will also have the option of, they will be writing tickets with that option as well, but they will be using our program
Okay.
for now.
So if they write a ticket on campus for running a red light on a bike or something,
Right.
people could still save money on their campus ticket by coming to Urbana's class.
Right. And we are talking to the university about the university certifying, having someone go through the league certified instructor program so that they could also provide help in teaching the classes.
Okay. Wow, that's
Just a
exciting.
question. So who is actually developing the course?
I will be.
You're developing, and who will offer it?
Yeah. Well, it's the city of Urbana,
Oh, well, what person?
so it'll be me.
Oh, okay, you'll
Yeah.
be doing it.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Are you an LCI? Have you done LCI stuff
I am.
before? Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So it will be kind of geared around that,
It will.
the LAB
Right,
curriculum for
right,
that.
yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the update. It's exciting to give people a learning opportunity rather than a ticket. Any other questions about that? Any other announcements? Okay. Gary, do you have one?
No.
Okay. Then I think we're done. Our next meeting will be April the 16th here at 7 o'clock. And until then, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.